welcome everybody. My name is Steve Alexander from MSP-Ignite. We're hosting this session, but to be honest, this is all about Huntress Labs and some content that they're going to bring to you. These are interactive sessions in that there's Q&A built in at the end. If you have a question and you're worried about getting it out there and you want to put it into the chat window, go right ahead. But we're going to try and let each presenter go. So each person's going to go for 40 or 50 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A before the next topic goes. We are starting off with Jeremy Young. He's freezing in Austin, so just be kind to him. And he's going to touch on redefining the cybersecurity stack. Jeremy, it's all you.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, guys. Again, Jeremy Young. I work with channel partners at Huntress Labs. Thank you for joining. I definitely appreciate you taking the time. Welcome to the MSP-Ignite Roundtable Huntress edition. Today, we got 3 sessions lined up. I'll start off with talking about how to redefine your security stack. Ryan Cutler is going to be taking you through evolving the hunt, and our very own John Hammond will bring us home with a look inside the dark web. First of all, let's start off with a bit of fun. If you're actually going to hang out with us all day, you deserve something. Take a screenshot of this bingo card, mark the session that you heard the buzzword in, bonus points if you put a timestamp in there. If you get bingo, send an email to me, jeremy.young@huntress.com with your t-shirt size and mailing address, and we'll send you a shirt as a thank you for the effort. If you social engineer us to say one of these things during the Q&A, still counts. We're okay with that. Now, MSPs, as you guys know, come in all shapes and sizes and from every background imaginable. No matter how you got started, for years, we've been telling our customers, hey, we'll take care of everything. Our customers have been assuming that the IT security has been coming along with that IT. For most of us, for years and years, IT security meant firewall and managed AV for a long time. And before 2016, that kind of worked out for a lot of us. And honestly, at 2016, 2017, that was still kind of the basic security bundle with maybe a few modest improvements. And then 2017 happened. It was like a year of eye-opening warnings and attacks. U.S. Department of Homeland Security and CISA put out an alert April 2017, warning attackers have begun using MSPs to attack multiple victims. They warned again in October of 2018, but more specifically that APTs are targeting MSPs. In the UK, same story. Warned in April 2017 of a campaign detected that targeted MSPs and even published how to mitigate those risks. And then Canada, they didn't want to be left out. They got in on it. Their Center for Cybersecurity saw and warned of the same things in 2017 as well. Over time, those warnings eventually changed. In the middle of 2020, the U.S. Secret Service put out an alert to the U.S. private sector and governmental organizations warning about an increase in hacks of managed service providers, saying, hey, watch out, make sure you're working with a good one. Over the past few years, a lot of MSPs, probably a lot of people on this call, started to begin their security journey after hearing these warnings. And that's why today we probably have a lot more security layers in our stack as a result. And overall, that's a great thing. But context here is key, and I'll come back to that, because even now, attacks are still getting through. And we're left wondering why. A new approach is really necessary, because we need to make this a mantra in the MSP industry. Software tools alone won't save us. And I'll say it again, say it with me. Software tools alone won't save us. Even if they could, how do you know which ones you need when there are so freaking many out there? And a lot of us look to NIST, the cybersecurity framework, which is a great place to start. And it's a great place to widely follow to try and shore up gaps in security. But look at all of the things that every one of us should be doing for every one of our customers. Remember how I said context was key? More tools to cover more layers is a good thing. But if all the tools I'm buying cover the same layer, at some point I'm falling victim to a law of diminishing returns. Most of us actually have a cybersecurity stack that looks probably more like this, where most of our budget is spent on preventative measures like AV, firewall, et cetera, and then recovery measures like disaster recovery solutions. Why don't we spend more time in the detection and response categories? Well, there you actually have to know what you're doing. As you move through the NIST framework, technology actually gives way to people in terms of degree of dependency. Specifically with the detect, respond, and recover, you can't take humans out of the equation and expect a positive result. The cyber attacker industry is actually maturing much more rapidly than the cybersecurity defensive industry. Ransomware has increased 50x from 2015 to 2020, growing to a $20 billion market. There's an attack every 11 seconds in 2021. That's over 300 ransomware attacks just during my part of the presentation. But don't worry, this really doesn't have to be that scary, because yes, ransomware remains a disproportionate problem for SMB and mid-market businesses. In fact, most victims that fall victim to a ransomware attack, 80+%, have fewer than 1,000 employees, but they're not targeting your specific customers overly disproportionately based on their vertical. They're targeting the low-hanging fruit. They're essentially spraying and praying at the top of the funnel. Attackers focus on the SMB space because of the overall lack of security there. Over 75% of the time, if one of your clients gets ransomware, the attackers originally got in due to either a remote desktop port or a phishing email. It's time to make a choice. We need to look at this through a pretty myopic lens. Two choices. You can start your security journey now, proactively, or you can wait until after you have you go on that journey. And if you're lucky and you wait long enough and you avoid everything, it's probably going to be mandated by an insurance provider. Or if you're following the changes in Louisiana, maybe it'll be regulation. Something will happen to ultimately force you to it, but it's much better to do it proactively. And y'all, I promise I looked for an easier choice, but there's just not one that exists. So step one, let's admit we have a problem. Step two, buy Huntress to solve all your problems. I'm just kidding, of course. The real step two, start thinking about everything like a hacker. Again, tools alone won't save you. You can get the best tools in the world, but if you don't think about security first, you don't think about how those tools could be used against you. The right tools in safe hands, that's awesome. The right tools in the wrong hands can quickly lead to disaster. We'll send you a handout for attending today. This handout is a white paper from Huntress and DNS Filter entitled The MSP Security Journey, Guiding Your Customers Towards Success. While it can be helpful with guiding your customers, make sure you follow it first within your own company and having your own business in mind. So go through some high-level pieces of it. Level 0, ignored. Most MSPs start here. Security isn't a priority. They have the mindset of, it won't happen to me. I'm not a target. IT is an enabler. It's a cost center. That's the only way it's seen. And if you're here, or if you have customers here, begin to think about risk and the concept of risk management, downtime costs, and the need for foundational security. Level 1 is impromptu. Organizations at this level have primitive security awareness, basic measures like AV and firewall, some limited but reactive awareness of risk. If you're here, try conducting an inventory and audit of workstations, critical infrastructure, assets, and network infrastructure to outline a comprehensive security plan. You have to know your own network better than the attackers to understand your weaknesses. Level 2 is involved. This is a business here is where they have their critical assets identified. They understand the value of cybersecurity. They have some organization-wide policies and processes likely already in place. They budget for a cybersecurity offering, and there is a foundation for a full-scale risk management program. If you're here, great. Work to standardize, upgrade, and start layering in solutions where your gaps are and create policies to ensure risk levels are at an acceptable benchmark across the organization. Level 3 is incorporated. Companies at this stage of security maturity are often in industries with high data security requirements. Given the nature of MSP businesses, all MSPs should be here. Your industry might not be highly regulated now, but if we don't fix the problem on our own, regulation will come at some form or fashion. At the level 3, companies have made security a part of their DNA. It's part of their core processes. All employees are brought in, adhering to process, using tools properly, data is protected, and compliance or regulatory needs are being met. The paper goes on to detail some of the main categories, so you should track which level you're at for each. It goes into detail about what's included in each one, risk management, identity and access, and so on. read the white paper, do a self-assessment, and have some of your key employees self-assess the company as well, and then compare notes, because sometimes our vision of thing might not line up to some of the employees down the chain. Understand your risk and where you can improve will help you continue on your journey to become more security mature. Keep in mind, you may be at a different level in each category. This will help you determine where you can quickly level up. Now let's look at some practical ways that you can start immediately to hack your business from a security perspective. At level 3, it was noted that security is in the DNA and core processes and values of the company. In order to build a security-first culture, you need to change the process to look at every decision through a security-first lens. Here's a very practical use case. Remember the before times when we got to go to places and talk to people, the good old days? When you'd come up to a booth, talk to me, you'd want to know about how much you can buy and sell Huntress for. Then you immediately start doing the margin equations. Then comes, do you have a free trial? Does it integrate with my RMM PSA? Does your product require training? Do you charge for admins? All great questions, all financially motivated, which makes sense. We're all here to make money, but I would challenge you to start sprinkling in to your vendor evaluation questions. Have you ever had a data breach? Has anyone ever used your tool to attack an MSP? How could this tool be used against me? What kind of MFA integrations or SSO integrations do you have? How do you handle security bugs? And do you have a bug bounty or a system for responsible disclosure? Your tools might help you make dollars, but if they're not secure, they don't make sense for your business. Here are some ideas to kind of help jumpstart the process. Maybe it starts with updating your core values to include security. You have to weave this into the fabric of your future existence as a company. You can start with your core values. Similarly, your MSA was most likely written when security wasn't as big of a concern to you. It's time to update it to protect yourself and your business, to define what you do, possibly more importantly, define what you don't do when it comes to security, and arguably most important, create MSA language that drives adoption of security best practices. Things like mandatory annual cost increases across the board, clearly defining security remediation scenarios. Higher hourly rates for security remediations and included hours are only available in your top tier plans, for example. Documenting what the charges would be for various scenarios will break the cycle of you getting stuck working for free due to MSA ambiguity. Next one down is hack days. I used to work at a company that we did these quarterly, and some of our best product features, some of our best internal projects came from hack days. These are designated days annually to work internally on the business. You truly won't believe what your company can get done in a single day if you set aside the time. And I guarantee your team has ideas that could save you or make you thousands of dollars if just given the time and energy to hack them together. These take planning, but can absolutely change the level of employee engagement of your company. Now, here's one that was brought to me by an MSP: blunder bounties. Create a financial or just goodwill incentive to encourage techs to self-report insecure practices and concerns. Don't necessarily penalize for honest mistakes. Celebrate the fact that it was found and reported. We all fall down. It's how we get up that matters. IR plan, I'm sure you've heard this enough over the last year, but have it before you need it. Update it regularly, drill the plan. If you're not comfortable doing that yourself, find an IR partner proactively to do some of this stuff with, so you're prepared in the event of an actual incident. And let's not overlook physical security. When you bring clients to your office, like one day, maybe later this year, they should see you as the shining example of what they aspire to be. And on that note, please, please, please treat yourself like your most important customer. Businesses that continually put off internal projects because they're too busy with customers will perpetually be behind every curve. You are your most important customer. Lead by that example. I can't tell you how many ransomed MSPs we've talked to at Huntress that were kicking off their MFA project next week, or told us that I told my team not to leave RDP open. It couldn't be that. It's that. Don't propagate a do as I say, but not as I do culture. Be that best example. Vendor qualification, we talked about this a little bit, but perform diligence up front. And then over leverage your vendor account managers and SEs to document security best practices for each tool. You're leaving free consulting on the table that could save your business. Lock down those tools. Hiring process, background checks, social media searches, TORC. What does that mean? Threat of reference check. Don't just check the references they list. During an interview, ask if it would be okay to speak to a former direct manager that they haven't listed as a reference. Whether you do or not, it's a truth serum. The threat of a reference check will sober up their answers in the interview. Internal IT security testing and training, third-party testing. You don't know what you don't know. Don't self-certify everything. Get external people to do some of this stuff for you. Partner. Hack how you sell. Once you do some of this, it allows you to really sell through security education. We're not relying on fear. We're not relying on assessments that say, here's all the ways you're out of line. You can actually educate as to define the why you do things differently. It will make security your defensible differentiator. Did I have a question? We're going to weaponize the low prices of your competition by pointing out that there's no possible way a competitor could be providing adequate security at the prices that they're offering. But here's the underlying question, right? How can you assume a post-breach mentality without going through the pain of a breach yourself? Have you ever been in a car wreck? This was my first car. A few days before the start of my senior year of high school, I was driving through a green light and a Lincoln Town car blew through a red and T-boned me. I flipped and rolled. Somehow I crawled out alive and relatively unscathed, but you better believe that to this day, I am still an overly defensive driver when cars look like they're not slowing down enough coming up to a red light as I'm going through a green. Do you have a relatable experience in your life that you can draw from to harness the right mentality without having to put yourself through the new trauma of a breach? Here's another example. CC Sabathia. He's one of the best pitchers ever. When he signed with the Yankees, it was the most expensive contract for a pitcher up to that time. At one point during his career, he weighed over 300 pounds. At no point during his career as a professional athlete did he care at all about his weight. But here he is now after retiring from baseball, after he got a stent put in due to a blocked artery. Waiting until after you have a near business death breach to care about security is the equivalent of waiting until after you've had your first heart attack to change your diet. Don't put yourself through that. Get your mind right. Start thinking like a hacker. Start putting security first in your business. And I know you've been on a journey already, but I'm not talking about the two-step journey where a talking head from a vendor gets up on a webinar and says, buy these 5 things and now you're an MSSP. I know they're telling you, here's your foolproof plan. Step 1, security. Step 2, profit. That's not real life. Nothing is ever that easy in the real world. So I've created a roadmap of what a more realistic journey might look like. Start by looking to understand attacker cost to truly help you understand your own risk. Start by asking, how could this be used against me? In every meeting, every decision, with every client, employee, vendor, think like a hacker. Doing so leads to more vulnerability scans, audits, pen tests, more strict change management, OS and tool hardening, vendor assessments, things like that. Use what you learn in these activities to update your core values and mission statement to include security, and then hold every employee, including yourself, accountable to it. All of this informs your decisions when creating a layered security stack based on your new understanding of your risks and your gaps. Cybersecurity is never one and done. So when this is all done, you create a compliance program so that tasks are performed weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually. Update your MSA to make all of the security updates that you've been through a profit center, not just a cost center. Increase those prices to accommodate for the risk that your MSP services now help mitigate, and then use the confidence of this entire life cycle and lessons learned to completely weaponize the low prices of your competition when selling your new offering at what might be double your old seat prices. Hacker economics is just like regular economics. It's all about supply and demand. Dino Dizovi, head of security of the Cash App at Square, put it like this: if the cost to attack is less than the value of your information to the attacker, you will be attacked. It's as simple as that. And attackers generally have a much better understanding of their costs than defenders do about their value of the data. To better understand attacker cost, I'd like to walk you through the pyramid of pain. Cue scary music, right? The pyramid of pain is not new. It was first posted about 8 years ago, but it still holds true today as it did then. The simple diagram shows the relationship between the types of indicators you might use to detect an adversary's activities on your network and endpoints, and how much pain it would cause them when you are able to deny those indicators to them. So this was written through the eyes of an attacker, and let's walk through it. Hash values. These are the most trivial thing for attackers to get around. A hash is like a file's digital fingerprint. No two fingerprints are exactly alike. On the one hand, hash indicators are the most accurate type of indicator you could hope for. The odds of two different files having the same hash value are negligible. It's like non-existent. On the other hand, any change to a file, even an inconsequential one, like changing a period to a comma or adding a null character at the end, results in a completely different and unrelated hash value. It's so easy for hash values to change, and there are so many of them that in many cases, it might not even be worth tracking. Moving up, IP addresses. These are very easy for an attacker to get around. So unless you're Tom Cruise dropping from the ceiling with a USB drive, IP addresses will be used as an identifier in every single attack. They can be easily hidden by using anonymous proxy services like Tor, or they can be changed autonomously at high frequency using tools that are common in the attacker attack chain. Domain names, a little higher, but still simple. One step higher in the pyramid, that's where these things are, domain names. These are slightly more of a pain to change because in order to work, they have to be registered, paid for, even if it is with stolen funds, and they have to be hosted somewhere. New domains are slightly harder to change than IP addresses, but it's still simple for an attacker to get around. Network and host artifacts. Here's where we start annoying the attackers in reality. We finally get some negative impact on our adversaries. When you can detect and respond to indicators at this level, you cause the attacker to go back to their lab environment and reconfigure or recompile their tools. Network artifacts, on this side of things, it refers to the ability to determine suspicious or malicious activity from legitimate activity. It goes beyond a user device and includes all of the Internet of Things, all of those devices. And examples might include patterns based on network activity, command and control infrastructure, being able to find the beacons that are calling out, URI patterns, certificate use, and so on. Host artifacts, this is going to include any artifact in the registry, a scheduled task, files dropped in the run folder that indicate persistence or presence of malicious activity. And then we move up to tools. This is challenging. If you are able to detect their tools and get rid of them, it's going to significantly bring that attack to a halt. This would typically be software that the adversary brings with them to perform a variety of activities, such as creating backdoors for a C2 channel, network sniffers, password crackers, things like Cobalt Strike, a redefine, Metasploit, etc. If we take away the adversary's ability to use one or more specific arrows in their quiver, most likely they give up and move on to low-hanging fruit. TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. This is making it tough on them because finally we're at the top of the triangle. When you detect and respond at this level, you are operating directly on adversarial behaviors, not against their tools. For example, you are detecting the pass the hash attacks themselves, perhaps by inspecting Windows logs, rather than the tools they are using to carry out those attacks. From a pure effectiveness standpoint, this level is ideal. If you are able to respond to adversary TTPs quickly enough, you force them to do the most time-consuming thing possible, learn new behaviors. They got to go back to the drawing board and figure out a completely new way to attack you. By the way, Huntress spends most of our time making attackers earn every inch of their access up here at the top. Keep in mind, the amount of pain you cause on an adversary depends on the type of indicators you are able to make use of. This knowledge lets you create your stack accordingly. The entire idea here is to understand attacker cost so you can better understand the things you need to do to make it more expensive to attack you. So if the cost to attack is more than the value of your information to the attacker, to be honest, you're probably still going to get attacked, but they'll give up before it actually gets to a breach. Remember how RDP and phishing make up the vast majority of the initial attack vectors that led to ransomware? It's because they're really, really, really ridiculously easy for attackers to do. And attackers aren't necessarily targeting your customer specifically. It's a numbers game. Think of it like a sales funnel. Through their phishing campaigns, brute force RDP work, they have command and control beacon activity on over 1,400 companies. This is like a lead visiting your website. From that, they pick their top 100 to attempt a ransom. It's like cold calling one of those web leads. Out of that 100, 27 companies get ransomware deployed. That's your demo, the quote getting delivered, right? But only a couple of them actually pay the ransom. A 7% close rate after a demo, it's not great. It's not very good. But when you consider their average ransom demand is like between 5 and 10 million, it only takes a couple to have a really great year. They don't care that the other 25 companies are left in ruins. Now let's take a look at a TrickBot infection and talk about how it relates to the attacker cost. TrickBot Group, they specialize in phishing and malware delivered as spam as their delivery mechanism of choice. The attacker probably bought a list of emails on the dark web for a trivial amount of money. Before the campaign, they registered new domains and gave them time to gain some trust so spam filters wouldn't stop them. They created an executable in a lab, making sure it wouldn't get stopped by AV or DNS filtering. Remember, all of these things, simple, easy, and trivial to attackers. Ultimately, some poor soul got a phishing email that looked relevant enough to click on. When they ran that executable, it actually ran the malware dropper. As I mentioned before, the attackers had already taken the time to make sure their executable wasn't going to be stopped, but that's okay because these campaigns only work once, right? Because we've been told for generations by antivirus industry now that as soon as something is known bad once, it gets marked as bad and we have herd immunity, right? This is the AV myth. Reality looks a little different. The dropper here, document-preview.exe, that was dropped in September of 2020. Same file and hash as used in this specific attack. Almost 2 months later, 1 out of 69 virus engines would flag this file as malicious. Remember, AV, next-gen AV, EDR, prevention tools are necessary, but all of them miss things like this on a daily basis. You need preventative security software, but they won't save you from all new and existing threats like many of their websites claim. Specifically, the AV industry has spent billions of dollars over the past few decades convincing all of us that they protect from everything. We do all the things on this list. In reality, the prevention tools miss well-known threats at least 50% of the time. So just don't believe everything you read. If AV doesn't catch the dropper, attackers are feeling golden because they never get caught after that. Continuing on the journey now, we see that the malware creates a scheduled task. The scheduled task itself is actually a mechanism of persistence because it's scheduled to run every time the PC runs. This is an example of host artifacts, but it also creates examples of the tools and TTPs because the scheduled task runs a batch script. Again, you might think the batch script would be something that AV stops because there's got to be bad stuff in there, right? Survey says it doesn't. AVs are an O for here. Now, a quick plug. If Huntress had been installed here and was running, the scheduled task being a persistence mechanism is where we would pick up. That's where the Huntress.ops team would take action, hunt down the attacker, say, not today, sir. Do not passcode, do not encrypt for 200 Bitcoin. So if you're wondering what we do, we hunt for persistence mechanisms created during attacker cradecraft. But going back to the attack chain, after your AV doesn't catch the EXE, after your AV doesn't catch the batch script, the payload is free to run. I'm no software engineer, but I can tell you that's not normal code. That is actually a TrickBot affiliate that in this case led to Ryuk ransomware during the UHS attack last September. From the moment their phishing link was clicked, it took them 27 hours to spread throughout the entire network to drop ransomware. The hospital systems were down for about 21 days. The ransom was set at $6 million. Now, let's talk about a few things that you could do now to exponentially increase attacker costs that don't cost you a thing. And I'm sure you are very tired of hearing this one, but it's going to bear repeating forever and always. A patched endpoint with a properly implemented least privilege policy limits unsophisticated actors when users inevitably do things like enabling macros. If a compromised user is not an admin, the actor can't do things like dump credentials from LSAS, encrypt any other user profiles, move laterally via pass the hash, etc. Now, I understand your client's management will always justify why they have to have elevated rights to be most productive. If you need to give in, hook them up with a separate administrator account for use in those limited scenarios. Keep in mind, even if they're not an admin, but all users have access to every share file, a single non-privileged user could encrypt the entire share file or file share. So compartmentalization is as important as locking down admin rights. After you've got your users' privileges and compartmentalization in order, you can move on to other overlooked settings like the global password policy, both GPO and the way your MSP manages shared credentials. By default, Windows workstations, even Windows 10, ships with no password length restriction and no account lockout threshold. When that earlier actor compromises a machine with these weak password settings, this allows them to brute force your local administrator accounts forever until they get in. It's equally dangerous when MSPs are setting the same password for all local administrator accounts in a client's network. In these scenarios, your attacker only has to compromise one account to wreak havoc on every system with this one password. And it should go without saying at this point, but everything possible should have MFA on it for every user and every account, and should use the highest form of MFA available. With those implemented, the most basic application whitelisting configuration, meaning non-admins can only execute things from certain specified directories, will provide your clients a major win. In a nutshell, this limits the users to executing pre-installed applications. Considering how often bad actors convince users to download EXEs like we just saw, and those are usually get stored in the user profile downloads folder, or they run JS files with macro-laden Word or Excel documents, and those often get dropped. The malware loaders get dropped into temporary folders. Many malware-enabled attacks would come to a screeching halt if you limited where executables could run. This forces actors to abuse legitimate Microsoft applications like command.exe, PowerShell, Red Server 32, MSHTA, etc. These are often called fileless malware attacks, or they would have to use techniques like DLL sideloading or search order hijacking. These too can be hindered with more advanced app locker script rules and DLL rules. There's a whole plethora of awesome Windows security features to combat advanced attacks capable of escalating privileges. For those unaware, Windows historically stored your plain text credentials in memory until the system is rebooted. Think about that server with 2 years of uptime. With system privileges, attackers can easily dump these local and domain passwords and then run amok. If your OS is currently supported and up to date, a lot of the historical issues are mainly cared for. Microsoft has become the largest and probably most advanced security company on the planet. And if you take the time to investigate and research the extended features, such as Windows Device Guard, Windows Credential Guard, controlled folder access, app locker, etc., there's a ton to gain from a security perspective that you've already paid for. And I know a lot of MSPs are starting to look at Microsoft 365 Business Premium as their main licenses to care for the Microsoft 365. When I learned the right Microsoft licensing name, they changed it again. This license, the Business Premium license, also includes email APT, includes conditional access that allows you to set all of those next level multi-factor authentication and conditional access policies. And it also includes license rights for Windows 10 to the Windows Virtual Desktop, which that's another whole conversation. That's another whole thing, but that could limit some of the attack surface as well. Once you're confident and you're adequately protecting your clients with the free features that are already there, here's where you can assess your client's risk profile. If there's still a need and budget available, complement your security gaps with layered security products and services. Since you've already rolled out AV, firewall, DNS to handle like the low-hanging fruit of malicious application behavior and the command and control communication, you could consider non-malware related breaches and infections. This includes anomalous user behavior. That's often identified by auditing event logs. You can check out Sysmon if you haven't already. Stolen credentials, multi-factor authentication will help out with that, and abuse of legitimate applications. How are these things getting executed? If you have security savvy staff, that's where you could also consider expanding your offering and to provide periodic assessment services like vulnerability scans and validating your patch strategy, stuff like that. We truly hope you start your journey proactively because it will start to change your total perspective. SnapTech, a fellow MSP, their CEO, Carl Brickmore, put it like this: our offerings are oftentimes double the other offerings on the list. But the reality of it is we win more deals than we don't because we've learned how to express the why. They will pay more if you can simply explain the value. It's that simple. He goes on to say, when someone says to you, this guy is going to do it for half your price, your reaction shouldn't be, oh man, I overcharge. Your reaction should be, oh good, that person is incompetent and I just need to help them understand why. Let's look at the value of your business. I spoke with Joe Panettiere from Channel to E to brainstorm about this. And here's how he suggested I frame it. Good economy, healthy MSP. So like a year and a half ago, right? Let's assume the MSP does about 5 million in annual recurring revenue with 10% profit margins. The actual multiplier would depend on a range of factors like customer churn, business growth, regional vertical market, health of buyers, etc. Somewhere between a 5 to 12x multiplier on profit, the MSP is worth somewhere between 2.5 to 6 million. I know it's a big range, but stick with me. Now let's look at the same MSP, challenging economy. The MSP gets hit by ransomware. According to the research from Ninja RMM and Coveware, some MSPs lose 50% or more of their revenue after a ransomware hit. So let's use the same formula as above. That same MSP may now have 2.5 million in annual recurring revenue. Let's assume the MSP miraculously maintains 10% margins. At that same 5 to 12x multiplier in profit, the range is now 1.25 to 3. So in a good economy, best case scenario pre-attack, MSP is worth as much as 6 million. Challenging economy, MSP hit by ransomware might be as little as 1.25. That's assuming, of course, the MSP survives the attack technically and financially, and their tarnished brand doesn't chase away all buyers. I realize these are not an exact science, but the example above at least offers some food for thought. And again, thanks to Joe P for working on this with me. If you're not already, of course, I suggest sign up for his newsletters. If you'd like to learn more about how Huntress helps make your business more costly than to bother attacking, please go to our website and start a 21-day free trial with unlimited endpoints. We'll walk you through it. And if you so chose, you could have Huntress on 100% of your managed endpoints in about 15 minutes during the trial to see what's out there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and leave this slide up as we go over Q&A, and we'll pause here.
So, Jeremy, we did have one question posted while you were on the pyramid of pain.
Okay.
And Al Mucci asked, are these events the ones that they try to use to avoid detection in your system? I'm not sure I follow you, Al, but if you want to take yourself off mute, we'd love to hear from you.
Overall, as he's getting off mute, overall, these are the things that the attackers are using to get around whatever defenses may or may not be in place. And so hash value, for example, if I am using something that an antivirus shows as known bad, all I have to do is go in and add a space to the end. And now that same antivirus probably won't pick up that file as bad. So that's what it's saying is this is really trivial for an attacker to get around. IP addressing, they make tools to auto rotate IP addresses. So now a DNS filter says this IP is known bad. That's fine. I burned it. I'm never using it again. So as you go up the chain, as you go up the pyramid rather, the things get tougher and tougher, that if you detect them, if you stop them, it's actually going to make the attacker most likely just abandon you. And that's that. When you think about that ransomware numbers game, the sales funnel, they spray and pray to get the RDP and phishing kind of just fish on the line, right? And then they pick their most juicy targets and they whittle it down, just like we do in the sales process. But a lot of that decision making comes back to this attacker cost. Who are the lowest hanging fruit that are going to be easiest to attack because they don't have things that can stop me up here?
Okay, that makes sense.
Cool.
I'm happy to elaborate if I missed it.
Anybody else with any questions? Jeremy, on your last slide, you may want to add the word net in front of profit, not before that, sorry. The one, Joe's slide. You may want to say net profit 10%. I think some people might read that and not follow.
Thanks. I will do that.
What you're talking about there. For our members, I'm going to yell at you if you're only at 10% net profit anyway, right? That's part of what I do. But if you're in growth mode and you're at 10% net, that's pretty cool as far as that goes. Anyone else with any questions for Jeremy? If not, we'll go ahead and move on. Jeremy, great job, by the way.
Thank you. Let's see. Is there anything in chat that I might have missed?
Nothing else in chat that I'm seeing, and I see no hands
I
raised.
have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So I know you guys do the persistent threat detection. I know you don't know the exact ratios, but out of all the crypto attacks, what would you say is a general ballpark percentage of them are persistent attacks or persistent threats on the computers?
So are you saying things that lead to encryption that need to get paid off by cryptocurrency? Of those, how many start with a persistence mechanism? Is that the question?
Yeah, exactly.
John, you might know more specifics. The whole premise here, let me go back to the pyramid real quick. So that kind of depends on the target, and it kind of depends on, for most of MSP's customers, I would assume that there is at least enough baseline security that a very high proportion, like 80-90%, is going to have to start out with a persistence mechanism to ultimately get to that point, because you guys should have, theoretically at least, have closed up all the lowest hanging fruit. You're not going to have RDP open. You're not going to have any users in your RMM, any admins that don't have 2FA on them, because those are the type of, you're not going to have any Windows administrators that are just easily brute forced. Because the only times that I, as an attacker, can encrypt an entire environment is when you have things that don't make it hard on me. And so I can get access to your RMM and then use that to push out ransomware everywhere. We've seen over the last couple of years that a lot of other products outside of RMMs, like antiviruses, for example, have some RMM capability. And we've seen antiviruses used to push out ransomware to all users in that cloud console. A lot of that can be mitigated by just putting two-factor on all the users. And then you can't just brute force or phish one admin. If I easily give up domain admin creds and don't have two-factor, so somebody who is has admin access to domain controller can push out ransomware through GPO, I don't need persistence, right? It is the more advanced attacks when you get farther up the chain to where you've done all those basic things and you don't give every user access to every file share by default. That way is when they have to say, okay, well, now I need to do things like actually do some reconnaissance. And to actually do reconnaissance and figure out the magic recipe for that attack to get to the point where I can spread out ransomware across the entire domain, that takes time. And Ryuk, which is the example we use today, they're one of the fastest. They are real. That's like kind of their trading, their calling card is how quickly they get to things. But even that example was 27 hours. Whereas when these malware droppers get dropped, usually in the first part of the executable running, a persistence mechanism gets put out there because they don't know yet how long it's going to take them to get to the point where they can get domain-wide encryption. And so the very first priority is to drop persistence so that if that domain credential gets changed, if they restart the box, their persistence comes back. So they're just not automatically kicked out. And that's where most people they don't see that. They don't look for it. I know your next gen AV and everybody in the world will say, yeah, we do all of this stuff. You could reverse engineer yourself into it. If you were a former NSA security analyst, like our founders were, you could use an EDR to eventually find persistence. We find it in like 15 minutes. And that's why we live up here. So, because once you kick out that persistence, they're not going to come back to that same environment. They're just going to pull from one of the other 1,400 command and control beacon activity they have from their phishing campaigns, and they're going to go that route. So really the whole idea here is just about raising the cost of attacks. And John, well, I've talked long enough. Do you have any idea to answer the original question of percentage of ransomware attacks that started with a persistent mechanism, at least from our data set?
I might have misheard, so I just wanted to clarify one more time. Were you asking about ransomware specifically, or like cryptocurrency mining malware?
The ransomware.
Okay, sorry, that was totally my bad for not hearing. Yes, ransomware is rampant, and but Jeremy kind of hit the nail on the head, and that like when you look at malware, their objective is to kind of maintain that access. So like first thing, immediately, hands down, they'll always end up putting in persistence. So when Jeremy threw out the numbers, like 80 to 90%, I would say maybe even more, they absolutely have to, because they want to maintain that command and control. And it almost feels like a no-brainer when you think about being the hacker. When you put on your adversarial hat, you play pretend bad guy. Well, hey, we need to cover our tracks and make sure we can get back in if something were to go wrong. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, so it's pretty common, basically, is the answer. That's most of the time that's how it happens, is through the persistent threat. Because I always look at things as a game of odds. So like my network engineer, he's like the most crazy security guy ever. Like we want to open like a single like high number port so that Google Meet would work and we wouldn't scan it. And he was like, you're opening yourself up. And I'm like, well, what are the odds that someone's going to scan that one port for Google Meet and then try and exploit that one port? And he's like,
hi.
He's like, so I played the odds games. I'm like, what are the actual odds? So you answered the question,
if you're sticking around for John Hammond's presentation, he'll probably show exactly that and why it's so high. Because again, so IP addressing, the port scans kind of fall in here, right? So if you, it's really easy for an attacker to change IP addressing in there, like the call out to. I get in and now I need an IP address to call back out to. And so my DNS filter is supposed to know these known bad IPs, and it's really easy for them to change it. It's also just as trivial for them to scan for open ports. And I'm sure one of the things that John will show is Shodan.io, which there are services out there that are just built to scan the internet for open ports, regardless of what they are. And we use that in our service. And something called external recon to show you, here are all the open ports we see from an attacker's perspective, so that you could say, hey, this is okay. This is, RDP. No. This needs to go get turned off. And we did that really because we couldn't see one more customer getting ransom as a derived from an original open RDP port. We couldn't make the assumption that, yes, you're doing these things, you being just like the public in general, because we saw that they weren't. Now,
He's muted. Go ahead.
Going back to the original question, the reason it's so high, the reason the percentage of persistence is so high is because these things are automated now. The attackers, when that malware dropper gets executed, persistence is created as a part of that initial malware dropper. And so it's not like I'm an attacker and I fish your credentials and then I log in as you and I'm moving around doing stuff. Most of the initial upfront pieces are just automated. And so it's not like they decided before they started that as a step 1A, after the malware loads, it's going to create persistence so that no matter what happens, when that comes back, when it gets rebooted, I'm still there. And that's why it's so high, because it's so easy for them to do.
We got a few more questions in the chat there, Jeremy. I don't know if you're seeing them.
Cool. Thanks for calling that out. Let me find it.
I'll try and hit you. I'm first, is Huntress running in real time and can manual scans be run?
Huntress is it's got let's save that for Ryan's if you're going to stick around. That's Ryan will cover much more of that in detail, but it is running. It's an endpoint agent that runs on the machines constantly. The scans run every 15 minutes. So we're not trying to replace your AV. We're not trying to replace your EDR that is supposed to stop a file as soon as it comes on. We are much more interested in the behavior, the artifacts, what's going on under the hood, and it requires the human element to actually pay attention to those. And I won't go further because I'm stepping too much on Ryan's shoes.
That's all right. I don't know if you're seeing these. I sent one right to you. Yeah. Oh, it sounds like, looks like John said Ryan's going to talk more about this one too.
John, was that in reference to the mouse moving around?
I don't believe so.
Oh,
I think
okay.
those are separate questions, I think.
Gotcha.
So, John, read that one for me. That one's probably better for you, actually. So we have an example of a user reporting watching his laptop's mouse move around and click on a number of different browser tabs. The system is running SentinelOne and Huntress, both showing running and protected. What should we be looking for?
Is RDP or TeamViewer or any sort of remote access and monitoring software set up on that?
Sarah, you want to jump in and take yourself off mute?
I didn't see that question in the chat. I'm sorry. So I might be.
It didn't go public. That's why.
Gotcha.
Sarah, you with us? There you go.
Hello, it's Crecor.
Hey, Crecor.
Hey. Yeah, there's I think Screen Connect was running on there. No other tools, no RDP. I guess we'll have to take a closer look at those, but
you might want to take a look and see how many instances of Screen Connect are running. And if you send a Huntress support team a note to say, basically, hey, do you see any other remote monitoring applications other than, and give us like your version of Screen Connect, we can look under the hood to see, because in order to get access and do something like that, you're going to need remote access through some form or fashion via either an open port that shouldn't be, or some tool that shouldn't be on there. And John has probably had enough other time to think about other shady stuff that could be going on, but those are the smoking guns, if you will.
Yep.
Yeah, and the easier way on the Huntress side as well is if you want to jump into that external Recon feature under the search icon, you could put in things like 3389, see if it'll surface up pretty quickly. That's just a quick little check. Things happen, change management, it just happens from time to time. So just a good sanity check there as well.
But we have seen it was middle of 2018. That's kind of when MSP and MSP industry tools had their coming out party to attackers, and Screen Connect was used not nefariously. It wasn't like somebody taking over your instance of Screen Connect. It was they downloaded Screen Connect and used it in a number of attacks because they knew that tool would be whitelisted, because that's what the MSPs were using themselves. And so there might be another instance of Screen Connect on your on that particular host that's nobody's flagging it because that's the correct tool, but it's just not the right one. And we that's already on our roadmap to do application auditing at that level where you can tell us what the right version of your RMM tool is, and then we will send you a report whenever we see anything else that's not that.
Yeah. In this case, we're also running the Datto RMM, so those remote tools will be live there as well.
Is this an account that you took over from another MSP at some point in time?
No, it's a laptop that doesn't get used much, so it's turned on once in a few months.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's something into support. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think if there's nothing else, I am going to stop my share and turn it over to Ryan for Evolving the Hunt.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Awesome presentation. Always a fan of watching you present, man. That was a really good one. I'll go ahead and just get sharing here. All right, so I'm going to talk about evolving the hunt. And, it's an interesting topic to be talking about here. I'm kind of smashing it between two really, really good presenters here, so I'll try to keep up today. But we'll save time for Q&A just like we did with Jeremy's presentation as well. But the idea here is that the cyber hunt is evolving drastically, and preventative security just doesn't cut it anymore. So we need the ability to absorb vast amounts of threat research, quickly distill and identify new key challenges, and swiftly deploy new solutions. In the session, I'm going to dive into how attackers quickly adapt their tactics based on change and what defenders need to do to accelerate their own evolution. All right, so let's address the obvious here. Securing the SMB is a huge responsibility and a tall task considering what we're up against. With that said, how can we bring cybersecurity to everyone? Probably the biggest challenge is that a lot of our SMBs either don't realize they need cybersecurity or they don't know how to go about doing it. Secondly, how can we make it easier for you, our partners and potential partners out there, to bring security to your clients? With Huntress, what we've realized is that we all need a security that is purpose-built for the channel so we can bring it to the SMBs. There's an idea of a cybersecurity poverty line, and everyone should have a minimum level of security to defend themselves from attack. We're all in this fight together, running towards the same goals. At Huntress, we just have our own role to play. First, we got to streamline defense. We want to make security more accessible so that we can make security easier to adopt. This was very much the theme of our transition into a security platform at Huntress, which we'll talk about a little bit later. How can we bring more tools to you, but not just to add more tech to your plate, but how can we do it in a way that enables adoption? What you'll see with our platform is the addition of new services without any additional costs so that we can make defense more palatable without all those procurement headaches. The second part is being able to continuously improve and iterate quickly. Attackers are always evolving. We need to keep up with, staying on top of threat research. Your needs as partners are equally as important. You deal with economic and global digital shifts all the time. Making sure you are achieving your goals ultimately ties directly into Huntress achieving our goals. And then the last part, we know that security is not just about tools. Tools only get you so far. There are processes that you need to deal with, but most of all, there are people. How can we teach our audiences about how security plays a part in the overall goals? We talked about it a bit on the last slide, ensuring our audiences acknowledge risks and minimize them when it comes to our ability to perform our business functions is ultimately the goal. And this is where the partner enablement service comes in for us at Huntress. With that said, how can you position Huntress? In other words, where does it fit into your security stack? You can imagine we get asked this question a fair amount. There are many different ways and frameworks and attack timelines to show where Huntress fits in your stack. And I'll go ahead and cover a few of them, but let us know if we've missed any as well. I like to say, look, you've got locks on your windows and your doors at your house. Huntress is going to be that alarm system alerting you of the scarier things that are making it through. But to get a bit more formal, let's dive in a little bit to the NIST cybersecurity framework, which allows us to take cybersecurity down to the next level, establishing actions and structure around cybersecurity. And first, we've got to identify what is most important to us. And what are your critical IT assets that you need to protect? Is there any prioritization or criticality around each asset you have? And for example, are services more important than end user devices? This has to be first. You have to know what you want to protect. And then we have protect, and we have to put in safeguards to minimize the likelihood and or impact of a cybersecurity incident. And MSPs do a really good job on the protect side of the house. And then on the detect side, if and when an incident does occur, we want to be in a position where we can detect that incident quickly and be prepared for that next phase of respond. And this is us preparing so we can respond quickly to a potential incident and minimize any impact that could potentially take place. And then lastly, on the recovery side, this is how we can get back to a normal state, bring everything back online and back to work so we can continue focusing on the needs of the business. And this is a follow-up on the previous slide, and it allows us to unroll that NIST framework and map to the solutions in your stack. And Jeremy covered this as well a bit in his presentation. When we think of each of these phrases in the cybersecurity framework, each security solution has its role to play, which is why we emphasize that security stack. And at Huntress, historically, we've operated specifically at what Kyle, our CEO, often calls the right of boom. Once something hits, how do you respond and recover? We'll go into details on what I mean by this as well. So think about it this way. For a long time, our cybersecurity focused on preventive measures. Think about entry into a large event, such as a sports arena, past life, obviously. There are turnstiles where staff scan your ticket to let you in the building. Imagine you're trying to get in without a legitimate ticket. You would be stopped before you even got inside. So if you were a bad actor, you would invest in ways to make your tickets look more legitimate. We use tools like firewall and antivirus to scan the legitimacy of data before it enters your IT system in an effort to stop the bad actors before they gain access. Attackers respond to these preventive measures and are finding unique ways to still make their way on through. And this is kind of a fun little slide just to show an example of this. But if you take a look here, it starts to make sense. And this is how we look at it with our solution in Huntress as well. In the past, with just AV in place, there's a little bit of protection here, but these fish are going to be making it through this net and continuing on with their day. If we add firewall into the mix, the holes get a little bit smaller, making it a little bit more tough for those bad actors to find their way on through. And if we start adding additional things like multi-factor and then even going above and beyond that from additional pieces that we've added into the preventative stacks today, even things like password management and user training, DNS layer filtering, whatever it may be, the holes get smaller and smaller and smaller, but these bad actors are still finding new tactics to make their way on through. Detection and response go hand in hand. So back to our sports arena analogy. Let's say the bad actor was able to present a convincing enough ticket to get past the staff at the door. Once inside, there would be security guards scanning the space, watching for suspicious activity. A really smart bad actor would find a way to hide in plain sight by imitating a security guard. Once they have a uniform and a badge, how do we determine that they are not a legitimate guard? We're applying this methodology to our security. We've found that attackers are constantly finding ways around our preventive measures, and we need to have a way to root them out. If we can continue scanning your computer network, looking for suspicious behaviors, such as a file that is named correctly, but maybe acting inappropriately, we can monitor and decide if we need to respond before they are able to execute on their malicious plan. Response involves finding a way to return your systems to normal. This could be as simple as kicking out the attacker by removing malicious software and then looking for any additional bad actors or actions that are involved. Or if the bad actor has been able to execute their malicious actions, such as installing ransomware or stealing data from your system via exfiltration, we need to be able to identify these actions as soon as possible. The sooner we can identify these actions, the sooner we can move into response in order to minimize that damage by rolling out that recovery plan and returning to normal. So what's important for us to remember is that we need both prevention and detection and response to give us the best chance at finding attackers. This slide does a little better job to help us describe that prevention versus detection and response. So I want to take a quick moment here and look at the preventive measures we have in place and how detection and response adds that additional layer. Email security is designed to look for known bad actors within your inboxes, which in turn causes the bad actors to create better phishing emails. This doesn't negate the need for email security. There's still hundreds of spam or phishing emails that are blocked outright. Firewall filters out dangerous websites and is important to protect your office, but doesn't work when not in the office. Important in this new work from home environment or in the bring your own device world that we're in. And then antivirus is a crucial step that filters out a lot of malicious activity based on the fingerprint of the file. And by taking a fingerprint of every file on your machine, we can compare it against a database of known bad files and immediately stop or quarantine it. So as hackers have advanced their trade, they've discovered ways to get around every layer of preventive security. That doesn't mean we don't need all of those layers. Each is still very important to building a full layered security approach, and we're all about that defense in depth. The final layer is threat hunting and it watches the how the different applications or files are acting. Other layers might, let a file that looks like a basic Microsoft application stay on a system, but having a security analyst look for suspicious activity means that we now have a way to find and remove the bad actors before they have a chance to do too much harm. In order to look for things that slip past your preventative defenses, the first thing you need is the ability to actually see it. A lot of tools in your network and security stacks have plenty of visibility that could potentially feed into an automation system to help filter out a lot of that noise. But you're still left with a considerable amount of information that needs analysis by trained threat operations. And this is where an MDR comes in. I can't stress hard enough just how important the threat ops analysis piece really is. So let's take a little time to walk through the why we need security experts looking at suspicious behavior. And just a couple of kind of funny examples here, but for a lot of things, context is key. And for example, quoting someone out of context can make or break the individual in the public domain. So here's an example. What if you just see the words goodbye? What does it mean? Does it mean you're saying farewell to someone, or are you applauding them on their thrifty shopping skills? It's hard to tell without hearing more about that conversation. So taking a look at this picture, we have a seemingly benign diving board. It's a beautiful summer day. Why not take a nice little dip? It's a little hot outside. But what if we told you that diving board would have you diving into a tank full of sharks? It's not so cool anymore, right? Probably not wanting to jump in. So being able to zoom out and look at that bigger picture and see the context, it's extremely helpful. In fact, critical for that threat hunting side. And with that said, let's take a quick look at monitoring the endpoint here. It's obviously a tough job. We've got all these layers, but the risk is still there. I've mentioned the firewall and the content filtering, antivirus doing, scanning of the system and user files. And we've got the persistent foothold side of the house here that Huntress is looking at and doing some ransomware detection. And we're trying to push further on the endpoint as well with additional features we're throwing into our platform. And there's a lot more pieces here also down at the bottom, that identity access and MFA. The list kind of continues on. It's a tough job. So, we keep using this word footholds or persistence. It's something that I talk about a lot in my day-to-day with our clients and potential clients. But what is that and what does it mean? When I joined Huntress, there were all these phrases I had heard, things like threats lurking in your environment, and then scare tactics like they're in there for weeks or months or even years. So this is where we started. This was something our founders had called out back when Huntress was founded. So really, what is a foothold? In short, it's an auto run abused by a malicious actor in order to maintain persistence. And we also call those persistence mechanisms. So while attackers are constantly evolving and updating their tactics, we as defenders want a systematic framework to unpack all that goes into an attack. And the attacker journey of, or cybersecurity kill chain, as it is often called, is a way for us as defenders to codify or categorize how and where to mount our defenses. So perhaps the most popular or well-known is the cyber kill chain from Lockheed Martin. So let's take a quick little look through that. The first step is to make your way into the environment. This is that break-in, or how an attacker makes their way into the systems. This is often through something like an RDP brute force attack, or more often than not, as we had in a conversation at the Q&A there, a phishing email and pushing out persistence. Once in, the idea is to survey the land. What potential system weaknesses can I, as the attacker, exploit? What are some easy targets or low-hanging fruit so I can maximize potential damage? After the survey, you want to put your stake in the ground. How can I implant myself in the environment so I'm very difficult to remove? How can I move laterally and gain more ground? As soon as I've landed in the environment, now I wait for instructions. Sometimes this could be days, weeks, months before I receive the instructions from command and control. But once I do, then what follows? It's go time. This is where ransomware hits. It's when potentially data exfil happens. This is the phase you'd ideally like to avoid at all costs if possible. And while not all attacks take this exact path, much of the evolution we see are found within the individual phases. Even this kill chain itself has evolved over time based on how attackers are changing. So let's look at installation for a second here. This is how the attacker implants themselves in the environment. Once they've slipped through preventive defenses earlier on in the attack, they don't want to let go of all the work they've put in. This is where Huntress shines. This is also where most preventative security measures break down, unfortunately. Imagine crafting a phishing email, adding graphics to spoof a common vendor like, say, an Amazon or an eBay, creating servers and infrastructure to build your malware. This all takes time and effort. But imagine losing all that effort to a simple machine reboot or when your victim logs off. It's unlikely they will open your phishing email again. So instead, you'll want to find a way to establish persistence on that endpoint, a foothold on the machine, so you can ride through some of those reset events that are taking place. And the truth is, we need to find ways to accelerate security adoption. And this is not an easy solution. How can the multi-tiered approach of solving for attacker threats ever move faster? My personal opinion is that it's the responsibility of organizations like Huntress and other subject matter experts to make data readily available. This shortens steps 1, 2, and 3 here. The next thing that falls on our shoulders is to be as proactive and preventative as possible, so IT can focus on supporting the daily needs of their clients. And finally, make evaluation, deployment, and management exceptionally easy. If those things are in place, then IT partners can get through their feedback loop substantially faster and get information to their clients faster. Just like we recommend increasing the tempo of your feedback loop, we are following that same advice. We're going to iterate faster by pushing solutions that will address the biggest pain points that are influenced by how threats are changing. Being aware of major shifts in IT, such as the movement to the cloud and SaaS, and most importantly, having a fantastic partner community that gives us feedback that we can quickly turn into action. And what I mean by that is to create this constant feedback loop between us and our partners that captures their needs and pain so that we can then deliver solutions tailor-fit to our community of service providers. Now let's jump forward a bit and look at action. In the majority of cases where we're seeing the most damage to end users is ransomware. Action could entail other things such as data exfiltration or even resource hijacking, but most of what we hear about is ransomware, and there doesn't appear to be an end to this type of malware. Ideally, we would not want the attack to reach this point, but given how attackers are weaving and pivoting their way through the other 4 phases, addressing this phase is about early detection and fast response. So if you can reduce your downtime by a day or 3 days or 5 days, what would you do to accomplish this? And so I've talked a lot about ransomware and different iterations of attack vectors, the process for solving for these, but I haven't really talked at all about the cybersecurity community and their response. Huntress knew that ransomware is and will continue to be a problem in the market. In most cases, we can see the larger attacks because they use a persistent foothold to launch their attacks. There are a few examples where we ran into ransomware through a persistent foothold and were able to alert a partner about the incident early enough that they could push out the recovery even before their client ever realized there was an issue. In cybersecurity, we know that it's not always about preventing the attack, it's also about how quickly you can recover. And just like our IT partners in our Defender feedback loop, we started asking ourselves, how can I find out when ransomware hits sooner? How can I see which endpoints have been impacted? And how can I prioritize and direct my response teams? All really important items to be checking off. But we also wanted to know, what about the ones that use fileless attacks, that don't use footholds? We were fairly blind to those, admittedly. What are other ways we could alert about ransomware as soon as it hit, especially if the attacks are evolving around current defenses? So we built our ransomware canaries. If you're not familiar with the canary in a coal mine stories, basically when coal miners were working, they would bring a canary into the mine shafts with them, and the canary was an early detection system for lack of oxygen. Canaries have smaller lungs and could identify a problem before the miners could. So hopefully that early detection system would get the miners and the canary out of the mine safely. Very similar to that premise, we put hidden files in place that watch for ransomware. As soon as something changes our canary file, it trips an alert. What's noticeable is that the concept of ransomware canaries is not a new or novel technique as a way of alerting on possible ransomware, but we've looked at how ransomware is changing and what needs to be included to make it a fully robust and useful feature. First of all, these canaries are hidden to the end user and extremely lightweight, as would be expected. Second, and here's what's different in the way we've designed these canary files have unique names for each user profile, and they aren't named canary in the file name, so attackers don't know how to bypass those files. By making them unique, we can create a QR code embedded as an image in the document that is completely unique to the end user profile. This way, if they're discovered somewhere on the dark web, there's a way to potentially trace back to what organization user had their data exfiltrated. And this is important now because of the extortion threats. And then finally, we're putting threat ops on top of these Canary alerts. Having our threat ops teams actually validate ransomware reduces false positives based on potential end user tampering or other corner cases that would otherwise create additional noise for you to weed out. So next up is external recon, and Jeremy covered some of this as well with some of the port scanning and the different threat vectors that bad actors are making their way into systems. So RDP brute force attacks are still extremely prevalent based on machines with RDP services exposed to the internet. Not to harp on about COVID, but we all know that more people are working from home now. With the surge of people now working from home, the external attack surface in return has also changed dramatically. So Huntress ran an analysis of endpoint data on nearly 500,000 computers, and this was pre-COVID. Of those computers at the end of 2019, there were about 30,000 unique IPs that we were seeing. Huntress did the exact same analysis in March. We obviously added more partners, but most of it is movement toward working from home. It ballooned 3x to just under 100,000 IPs. So the attack surface is getting wider, and it happened almost overnight in this new world that we're living in. And with that said, is this remote workforce going to be the new normal? In time, it's just going to have to tell. Something that attackers have been doing forever is searching for open ports. It was less of a problem when everyone was working behind a single firewall, but now, based on our data, you have 3 times the amount of attack surface to protect. So in terms of the defender feedback loop, step 1 is learn. In this specific scenario, learning means that we're aware of certain external vulnerabilities in the environment, and knowing that we have those vulnerabilities helps us get to step 2, which is decide what our next steps are. With external recon, especially given the increased attack surface amidst more remote workers, we wanted to provide more visibility into whether my clients have services exposed, changes that impact the attack surface, identifying potential exposure for new clients. And then when it comes to our external attack surface, there are many tools out there that could potentially offer reports, but our external recon is meant to provide ongoing updates to open ports and services that may require additional attention, essentially calling out some of the commonly abused ports for our partners to be able to get that visibility around any gaps they may have there that they need to close the loop on. And it helps guide decisions on how to handle any current exposure. In June, we released this feature of June of last year called External Recon that I've been mentioning, and it scans for those open ports like RDP, open SMB shares, SQL Server databases, again, those commonly abused ports from an external attacker point of view. And it's another way we can keep you safe by providing visibility aside from the other components that we offer in our platform. From an IT provider standpoint, this data is helpful, but in my opinion, what makes this so powerful is the additional decision points it can lead to. We give visibility into what is exposed so you can make better decisions for things like privilege access management or elevated permission levels or who has external access. Are you using 2FA? And the list kind of goes on there. But here's a quick look at what that looks like, surfacing up those public IPs that are calling back to the Huntress service and letting you know of any externally available ports that are existing. And iterations have happened to the platform since then where you're going to have this list out of all the services taking place there. So you can kind of dive deeper into them and make your own judgment calls. So how does it work? You can deploy Huntress with your RMM. Our agent uses less than 1% of your CPU, about 20 megabytes of RAM. Very easy to deploy out using your RMM system, pre-built scripting for all the main RMMs out there today. We are collecting metadata on the auto runs in your system and sending that up to our cloud. Once the data is in our system, we classify your data based on trusted versus reputable, trusted and reputable versus the things that we have never seen before or look suspicious. For unknown and suspicious data, our threat ops team will open an investigation to determine if the data is safe or malicious. And we provide you a detailed incident report directly to your PSA, which outlines the exact steps needed to fix it. And I'll go ahead and show you this in a minute as well. So we're only going to be sending a ticket for actionable items signed off already by our threat ops team, which helps you avoid alert fatigue. So anytime you ever receive an incident, it's already going to have been reviewed by humans on our threat ops team. And there's just simply those action items to carry out for you guys. So what really makes us different from other MDR services is that instead of us staffing those security engineers to do the remediation, which can get kind of messy and intrusive at times, we use our researchers to put together step-by-step instructions so that your help desk can keep knocking out tickets and you guys can keep the margins from that labor markup. So we try to pass those savings on to you guys instead of charging that additional 5, 10, whatever it is per agent per month that you might commonly see in that managed detection and response space. And this is going to give you the option to have world-class security engineers partnering with your team at more of the price of a product or those additional, as opposed to those additional human beings and the cost that you would have to add internally. here's a look at our dashboard, as you might expect to see, but really we didn't want to create another pane of glass for you to look at. We integrate pretty much all of the info you're going to want directly into your PSA when these incidents come through. And again, we have the deployment capabilities with the pre-built scripts to push it out. So we've already got that work done for you guys. We have 3 different areas, which are active incidents, resolved, and investigations that you'll see up top here. Active, pretty self-explanatory. We send you these when we find those breaches in your systems. This is the only area of the dashboard you really need to be worrying about on an ongoing basis. As soon as these incidents are fixed, we move them to the resolved incidents category automatically. We classify these incidents as critical, high, and low. Your criticals are going to be things like TrickBot, Emotet, spreading around the systems at a rapid pace. This is kind of like that drop everything and get to it immediately moment. This is that 9/11 drill. This is 911 drill. The highs are clean this up quickly as it's an active infection that could be stealing data or logging keystrokes, probably located on one computer. It drops other types of malware, probably not spreading to other systems, but has the ability to do significant damage. So we want to get to that today. And then your lows are things like, hey, let's clean this up for good network hygiene, malware remnants, artifacts from past cleanups left over from previous infections. Maybe the executable was removed, but those footholds are still remaining, making it quite a bit easier for a bad actor to kind of sell that access, drop a new file, and point those existing footholds back on over. And then other things like pups and adware and slimware, from a hygiene sake, we want to make sure to get rid of these. They're not viruses today, but they can turn into something down the road. And then you've got your resolved incidents, again, pretty straightforward. The agents run a survey every 15 minutes. So we see that those footholds are gone and move to resolved. If we see remaining footholds persisting, we will keep it in the active incidents area. And then lastly, the investigations. These are things that are brand new that our threat ops team is running, things that look suspicious and we have never seen before. Think of it this way: there might be a new application with a new auto run, and it's something we haven't seen before. We got to reclassify that as something that's reputable, or if it is malicious, send an incident report your way. So we log the results of these brand new investigations we do, so you can actually see what we're looking at. And then the majority of investigations turn out to be clean. The malicious ones, like I mentioned, will be sent to you into your PSA or via email. Ultimate goal here is to be able to classify these as either known good or known bad, so that we can apply it back to our one-to-many approach ongoing. And I mentioned on the last slide that we will push these incidents into your PSA. We understand that we're borderline worthless to you unless your techs can receive our alerts and the tools they already live in. So here's an example of a redacted ticket pushed to auto task. It shows you what client and device got infected, a clear description in layman's terms of what's going on, recommendations on the severity based on the potential outcome of this of the immediate issue, and then what other security products are actually running on that device. Simple remediation instructions will follow, written so that junior level techs can follow them. And this is an auto task ticket again. It's for a form of malware called Dridex. It's a banking Trojan. And this type of malware has been on the rise and very common as of late in the trials that I've seen within Huntress. Not just used for banks, it can be used to distribute additional malware as a dropper, also known to have a final payload of ransomware. And you might be familiar with droppers. Droppers sit dormant on your device. They phone home to command and control servers only when they want to grab additional malware. Again, this could be days or weeks or months, just depending on the situation. Basically, they just kind of chill until they get further instructions. In this example, this malware bypassed Sentinel-1, but things like this get past the full spectrum of AVs all the time. It's not to disparage these AVs. They're amazing and valuable tools. They're just not designed to look for the same types of things that we're looking for. While providing reports with the relevant remediation instructions is cool, we took it a step further by introducing the assistive remediation feature that you'll see on this page. One of our customers recently, had TrickBot, and here's a TrickBot ticket giving a description of the infection. As you can read here, this banking Trojan is capable of automatically propagating throughout a network and often used to install other malware. We show you what host it's located on and what security products it bypassed in the system. But now, on each ticket, you'll have an assistive remediation button. And once you click it, it will pop up a list of actions we can take to help with the remediation, essentially like our easy button. We can have that agent carry out these actions on your behalf at that next 15-minute check-in that it does, as it checks in every 15 minutes to scan the auto runs. Fast forward to today, and we've now released ransomware Canaries, external Recon. We're continuing to improve assisted remediation and build out reporting and analytics and our partner enablement tools. And now our managed AV with Microsoft Defender is in public beta. So with that, where does Huntress fit? If you look at that NIST framework, again, we're covering the blind spot that most MSPs have between their preventative security and their backups. We focus on that detection and response. And one of the most positive discoveries we've found as of late is that the non-ATP Microsoft Defender is a top performing antivirus. Also, it's a next-gen AV, which a lot of people don't know about, and the feedback loop to the ATP service feeding their EDR platform. So this takes us to what we've spent a lot of our focus on lately. And so here's a bit more on our managed AV service. You may be asking, why are we doing managed AV? Managed AV actually sits squarely within our mission of streamlining defense. One of the things you might hear a lot is pressure around the idea that we're not doing enough when it comes to security, and that there are new gaps and new tools that need to be added. But there are tons of configuration knobs that will improve security and are completely free. But trying to manage it or deploy it is where things become tricky. The idea with managed AV is, how can we get the most out of the tools you already have at your disposal? So here's a quick little look at what we've been seeing around Microsoft Defender. It's been a huge up and coming player in the AV space. It's already on millions of devices that are out there today, these millions of Windows devices. Like I mentioned, it's been scoring perfect across the board for protection, performance, and usability on an ongoing monthly basis here with these third-party AV testing. And so the only problem here today is that where it exists now, it's really difficult to manage, and there's no real dashboard or reporting capabilities if you wanted to try to use the efficacy of this tool in Microsoft Defender, as Microsoft has made a big push into security and really elevated what they're capable of doing. So if you wanted to manage it today, you'd need a Microsoft tool like Intune or a CCM, but it's just single tenancy. And for MSPs in a multi-tenant world, it's not really beneficial for them. So we've introduced a way to manage it in a multi-tenant environment in a capacity that makes sense to our partners, our service provider partners. And so we're really excited about this, and we've got it out on public beta now. So if you wanted to try it out, I'm more than happy to do so. And finally, our updated partner enablement service is on the Huntress dashboard. It will be divided into 3 sections. The first is Master Huntress, which will include technical documentation, onboarding guide, and more to maximize your Huntress experience. The second is on Grow Revenue, which will contain ready-to-deliver slide decks that are co-brandable with your color schemes to add in there as well, and content you can use when selling security to customers and prospects. And then finally, Gaining Knowledge is going to include security educational assets and information for you to utilize. One of them is what Jeremy was talking about with that guide to selling cybersecurity. That is going to be an asset we'll push out after the event today. So next steps, like Jeremy mentioned, if you are ready to check us out, we do have a free trial for 21 days. But we've talked about that enough there. We'll just go ahead and push on to a Q&A segment off of my presentation.
So questions, anybody? Show of hands, throw it into chat, whatever works for you guys. Nice job, Ryan.
Thank you.
Great job, Ryan.
Appreciate it.
I am not seeing anything yet.
Fire away. Anything around the product, more than happy to help.
We've got one in there, which is always, it's always a difficult question for you guys to answer, right? But, and I'm not going to ask you to answer it the way the post was done, but there's obviously competition out there for you guys. Mm-hmm. How does one choose, right? I mean, clearly everyone on this call that's speaking would agree that Huntress is the strongest program out there and the one we should use, and we should layer around Huntress rather than start with something else and bring it in. But seriously, how does one choose and keep up, right? I mean,
yeah.
As far as that goes, any thoughts on it, Ryan?
It's a tough conversation. I think that the conversations I have internally just on my own calls with MSPs, they can go in many different directions. Obviously, with this one specifically with Rocket Cyber, it's a SOC as a service company, so very different as far as what they're doing compared to what we're doing. They have their own stack, and they're utilizing that. They have their own internal talent. And obviously there was a big write-up over last night with our CEO and some other folks internally. And I'll kind of default to the founder of our company answering the question around some of that stuff there. But I think for me, a lot of the times it becomes a conversation around security spend versus like efficacy in that security stack. What is your budget? How do we elevate the efficacy of that security stack in a way that makes the best sense for your clients? And so, with Huntress, at our price point, we tend to think that we can be something that's spread across of all your customers. We're, at volume, getting close to almost half the price of what next gen AVs are at some points here, at $250 per agent per month or so with the next gen AVs. And so some of the conversations there around AV is like, well, are you getting that elevated level of efficacy out of that next gen AV compared to what you're paying 80 cents on this other AV for? Or if you're able to come into the Huntress platform and not have to pay anything extra for that potential elevated efficacy out of something like Microsoft Defender, what can you add into your stack with that additional 250 that you weren't spending previously for? It's just really a tough one to answer. I think this one is that we're totally different services. Rocket Cyber is a SOC as a service organization there. And so a lot of the times is like, is that something that all of our clients need? Or is it maybe something for those customers who have elevated levels of compliance? And we might be able to have that as something on top of what our core offering is. I see Huntress as part of the core offering. And so that's kind of the easiest way I can handle that.
Yeah, and they actually answer in a fairly similar way.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact.
And Ryan alluded to a thread that's ongoing in the MSP subreddit. I dropped the link to that in the chat, and it would take a minute to catch up on it. So save that link for later and catch up on it. But that will help catch you up on what our founder, who is in there as, what's his Reddit name?
Marco09 or something, I think.
Yeah. And he's very transparent about being the founder. You'll see from his response, but a good write-up in there, and your peers' opinions in there as well.
Super candid, really impressive to hear a founder talking about that. Pretty happy that he's really an open book when it comes to things around why we're doing stuff and how we're going to go about it, and really giving his explanation as to the why there, even on the financial side of the house. So very nice.
And in fairness, he's been that way from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really has been every step of the way. We've got a question about the alert response time for Canary files that get changed. Is it how quick do we get alerted to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the with the Canary files, when they get alert, it'll trip right away and it'll send a critical incident, but it needs to be reviewed first by someone on our threat ops team to make sure that it isn't something like user tampering or some type of a false positive that comes over. So usually the Canary files are a little bit different than how we scan auto runs. So John might even be like a better person to answer this question as well. With the auto runs I'll answer that piece of it. If we see an incident within the auto runs that there is persistence or footholds in place, those scans are happening every 15 minutes, and then somebody needs to review that, which can take a couple of minutes as well. So maybe allow that like 19 to 20 minute time frame before something kicks on over to you guys. But that is just crazy fast. And if something is unknown or suspicious, never been seen before, that they're picking up and running an investigation on, maybe hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that. But we're still talking about like Google, Facebook turnaround times for something that is unknown. So really good timeframes. John, do you have any insight into timeframes with the Canary files?
I don't think I would be able to give you an exact, specific, certain 1,000% correct all the time number for the minutes or the hours or whatever it takes. I will foot stomp and kind of reiterate that it does take just a smidge of manual analysis. So we have our own sanity check and context. The way that the ransomware canaries work is that it's a simple file, right? It's this little tripwire that if we see it modified or tampered, okay, that's an indicator, just one indicator that ransomware might be present. So we're going to examine that a little bit further. Like, is it changing the file extension? And is that file extension still going to be present across the rest of the file system? Additionally, one thing that we look for is the smoking gun of the ransomware note itself. So if we see another text file or another document in that same directory and it's still present in all the other directories, then we can get a little bit closer to the conclusion, like, yes, absolutely, this is ransomware. What I can assure you, though, is that, hey, you're going to be communicated with all along the way. Like, we're going to be taking our notes, we're going to be doing our own analysis and understanding this, but we'll make sure that that communication is there throughout.
Yeah. And let's talk for a second about why we built ransomware canaries. So the question, one of the questions at the end of my session about like how many of them started with persistence, there was still earlier on at Huntress, there was always a disconnect between persistence is only just now kind of starting to be understood. We've been talking about it for a long time, but it's hard to get people, and the founders, they don't talk a lot about what we do. They would get out there and they would do their really cool hacking demos and get everybody excited, but they really wouldn't. And if you look at Tradecraft Tuesdays, they still don't talk about what we do. So that's where we come in. That's kind of our job. And so persistence is starting to be more understood now, but for a long time, people would assume, oh, Huntress can stop ransomware. It's like, no, we find persistence mechanisms. And so if an MSP who used Huntress had ransomware happen, because RDP was open or because they didn't have MFA on their RMM administrators and the RMM was used to distribute ransomware. They come to us and say, guys, you're not doing your job. Why didn't you stop this ransomware outbreak? And we're sitting here going, we never said we were going to do this. That's not part of our remit. And so, but that is part of why you see this platform evolving. That's why we did the external recon thing. So we can show you very quickly that if RDP is open or not. And then the ransomware canaries was born out of this. People are going to get ransomware for unrelated reasons as to things that don't just always start with persistence. And also Huntress, like in the community now, if you had a friend MSP who didn't use Huntress, who just had an incident, there's a pretty good chance one of the things you're going to tell them to do is go start a free Huntress trial right now. And I mean, that's not how we want to engage with people, but that's the reality of things. And so when you push Huntress out after the fact, Canaries aren't involved there. We're probably going to find that ransom note before we find anything. But in the small use case where Canaries are out there, there's no persistence mechanism and ransom starts to outbreak, the actual best use case that the version 1, which is where we're at of Canaries, is trying to solve is scope. Because what happens is an MSP comes back on Monday morning and they have support tickets waiting from their customers saying, I have a ransom note that I'm looking at on my screen. And they don't know how wide it is. They don't know where it is. They don't know if it's just one computer or a dozen computers. They have no clue. If they are included, if their RMM is included in that, doubly so. They are completely shut out. They have no ability to have a clue. And so the initial piece of the problem that we were trying to solve is actually scope and being able to allow MSPs who had this problem, this outbreak happen, immediately understand the scope of it so that they can make the proper next decisions. The ransomware V2 Canaries that like we're working on now gets to the host isolation, host lockdown, gets to the more immediate turnover responses where you can set up playbooks to where if this, then that. If you see if Huntress determines this is ransomware, automatically isolate the host to kill it from the network, except for my RMM and for Huntress, things of that nature. But the initial problem we were trying to solve with ransomware canaries is scope of the outbreak. And then the additional things will continue to get better and more advanced as we continue to evolve that particular feature.
Yeah, great context. And if I can come over the top just a little bit here, I think that our founders, what they've been trying to do is not necessarily recreate the wheel on any type of security tool, right? They want to address what they see as the gaps in service providers' security stacks. And this is something that is there. And like what Jeremy is talking about, is there are other threat vectors that we could be missing, when we're looking at footholds and persistence alone. And so ransomware canaries are to fill that. If something is like a smash and grab in an email attachment, or maybe just a URL redirect pushing out, ransomware right away, and it's not via persistence, we want to be able to alert on these things, because after something like that, you want to be able to respond as quickly as possible, because if you've been hit, that's the ultimate thing, is how quickly can I respond? And something about these Canary files, they have a unique identifier tied to them, so you know exactly where to go to when the event happens as well. You know exactly which agent to go to, whereas before that initial upfront work of just figuring out that piece could have taken up a lot of time.
Ryan, there's a question about our Datto PSA integration, whether it's two-way, you can communicate two-way with it. The answer is not at this moment. We are pushing our incident reports into your PSA that have all the information in it. And then the second part of that question is, do you have to turn off when an incident is remediated, do you have to go in and close the ticket? And I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, good question. So right now, the idea of not having that two-way sync, we want you to be able to disposition your own incidents as they come on through as well. So we don't want to just automatically close things out for you guys. That's where it's at today. So there isn't that two-way sync. If you close it in Huntress, it's going to auto close out in your RMM. That work would still be left for your team to go ahead and close that out and disposition.
But one more step further is that you can't artificially close a Huntress incident report. Mm-hmm. Huntress incidents get closed out when the footholds are gone. And if footholds are still there, our incident's going to be still there.
Yeah.
So while you could have a tech erroneously kill an incident report in your PSA, if the single source of truth is going to be Huntress, and until the footholds are gone, that incident will not show up as resolved.
Yeah.
And for the current partners, if you wipe and restore from backup, you'll want to delete the corresponding agent in the Huntress console to resolve that incident, because the new agent is going to show up, and that will just kind of be an orphaned incident, orphaned agent, until you delete the agent in the console.
Yeah, nice context.
Yeah, you don't want your text to be able to close an incident without it actually getting remediated properly. But two-way sync where your text and our support team are talking without leaving the PSA, we know that's a request on especially Dido and ConnectWise, of course, the top two. And that is on our roadmap. If you go to, is it feedback.huntress.com, I believe?
Yeah.
You have access to our feature requests. And so not just access to, you can submit feature requests to give us your great ideas.
Yeah,
or upvote ones that are already there.
Really cool new feature. But basically, we're trying our best to listen to our community of partners to iterate on our product in a way that makes sense to you in your day-to-day lives as service providers, which is, in my opinion, pretty cool from a vendor. So.
I don't see anything else there. I think this was part of John's plan, though, because he was lobbying for more time.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah, I think we should go ahead, Ryan.
All right. I think we're all set.
Cool. You can
All
turn it over to me.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and share your screen, John?
For sure. How much time do we end up having?
We give you like 2 days if you're okay with that. So
I don't know.
We've got an hour and 15 left total. So
Nice.
I think you're fine.
All right, cool. Well, we'll have a party then. This will be fun. Well, sweet. Hello. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm super happy to be joining you all. I realize that I am kind of the last show. I am the caboose here, but hopefully I appreciate you bearing with it, and hopefully we can get through this one just as well. This is a presentation titled Inside the Dark Web, How Your Business is Being Targeted and Sold. And it's funny, I don't think this actually plays along all that well with some of the other presentations. So it's like, now it's time for something completely different. This might be a little spooky. This might be a little shady, right? We're going to be kind of digging into the corners and crevices of the internet to see some of the weird, peculiar, and strange stuff that's out on those little marketplaces out there. This should be fun. I hope this is super pertinent to you and what you guys do, and I hope you get something good out of it. But this is meant to be a presentation for you. So please do make it interactive and engaging, interact in that chat. I'm happy to see anything. And of course, we'll have questions at the very end. But don't hesitate to troll me as the presenter, right? You can throw some virtual tomatoes or whatever, but let's dive in. So this is our roadmap, right? Here's kind of what we're going to be talking about, the outline and agenda. And I'll be super quick with this so we can really get into the good stuff. But we are going to take a quick stroll back to 2020, everyone's favorite year. And we'll go on a little safari ride. We'll see what the dark web kind of has to offer, some of the malicious marketing that they have in place there. And we'll go into the peculiar sales tactics, right? The marketing techniques that hackers are using to make a pretty coin or some good dollars off of evil, illicit, nefarious stuff. We'll talk about how you're targeted, and then we'll dive into this. So. All right, let's talk about those flashbacks from 2020 now that the agenda is off the table. I wanted to kick this off with this specific little Secret Service notice that went out some time ago. I think this was month 6. Is that June? Is that July? I might be blanking on the time there. But a little Secret Service notice explaining, hey, we're seeing an incredible rise in cybersecurity attacks, specifically ransomware, phishing, COVID-19 scams, and more. And we'll go kind of in the weeds on that for this presentation. But I think it's crazy to see that this notice goes right out to say, like, hey, this is specific and it's highlighting the MSP community. It doesn't hide anything. It goes right out and says, Secret Service is seeing more and more cyber attacks against managed service providers. And even more so, it's seeing attacks that are utilizing or using a compromised MSP, because that's the queen of the hive, right? You've got the RMM tools that will give you a little bit more control and access to plenty of other organizations and businesses and companies. So it puts out this notice, but this isn't strictly to the MSPs as the audience. It's the notice is going out to everyone. It's a nationwide alert. And I don't mean to read this verbatim to you, right? But it does say here that the big takeaway, cyber criminals are leveraging compromised MSPs to conduct a variety of attacks. And why wouldn't they if you guys are the queen bee, right? All of the offensive techniques that they have once they've compromised the MSP, well, that can trickle down to all those other businesses. And that's the nature of the beast here. So what can we do? How can we kind of prevent this? How do we mitigate this? How do we stop this sort of thing? In the rest of the notice, the Secret Service goes on to offer some best practices, right? But as you can see, this is kind of high level. It's like 1,000-foot view here. There's a short list of best practices, have a well-defined service level agreement, ensure remote admin tools are patched and up to date, enforce least privilege, the stuff we've kind of all been talking about, right? The best practices. But there is one that I want to emphasize here. There's a last bullet there that says proactively conduct cyber training and education programs for your employees. Get people in the know, like educate them, tell them all about the cyber stuff. That's nice and all. It's cool to kind of have that bullet point there, but how do we do that? It just says, hey, do this thing, but how do we actually do that? It doesn't go into a lot of depth on how we accomplish that. Truth be told, I think that's kind of a hard question to answer. I'm hoping that this presentation can give you a slice of that education, maybe help shine some light on the cybersecurity that's pertinent to us in the MSP community. So now let's dive into the dark web, right? Spooky, scary stuff. This is when you have that black background and the green text and like, I should go get my hoodie and shine a projector in front of my face. Take a look at this screenshot here. This is a post on Torum. And that's an online bulletin board website, like a forum, right? You might find over on the dark web through Tor or whatever squirrely, shady, and sketchy corners of the internet where maybe there are some peculiar drug deals going on. And I don't mean drug deal literally, but I sometimes do in that case. Drug deals may very well be happening over there on the dark web, but the trading and buying and selling and marketing of plenty of other stuff that might kind of raise an eyebrow, the sketchy stuff. So us in the security community, right, we've been seeing more than enough stolen data, right? Personal information that could be compromised and gathered and then sold, maybe so a hacker can just make a quick buck or get some coin off that. You might think of leaked credit card numbers or social security numbers, and that's certainly prevalent. But I kind of want to start small here. So take a look at the screenshot. This is a quick screenshot of a post advertising a DL or a driver's license. Looks like the hacker has the scan, both the front and the back of their driver's license, and maybe, okay, they're selling that for $10. That's all it takes. I mean, what a deal, right? Would you buy that? I don't know. Some of you might scoff though, right? I mean, it's just a driver's license, but you want to get into the big data. You want to get into those social security numbers. You want to get into the date of birth, medical history. Take a look at this post. This says, I have Foles with social security number, date of birth, and driver's license. I'll sell that to you for $25. And it comes with a little bit of bonus, right? You could get a whole background report and credit card information for just $40. I think that's a neat little marketing scheme, right? A little incentive, pay a little bit more and you can get more access here. Oh, and I like this last line here. Escrow is accepted. So that's comforting. They'll offer a little third-party middleman, so you don't have to deal with the sketchy direct confrontation, right? And they'll handle the funds for you. All this information, right? Everything that they have on a person, that'll kind of, it's funny. It has this lingo and terminology and cool nickname over on the dark web for fulls, or the full information on a person. They have their own language, and it's cheap, right? Just $40. Now, obviously, information is not the only thing on the market. If you browse around a little bit more, you do some more digging, you can find hackers selling access, computer access, right? So now we're going to pivot to more of the technical side of the house. And take a look at this post. We have fresh RDP access to Windows 7 computers and Windows Server 2012. RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, control over victim computers, systems in the United States. They list a few perks here, right? Hey, I do some quality assurance. I check every login and password before I sell. I make sure that I can work with this escrow services for you. They even offer a little screenshot, right? That's kind of neat. We actually contacted this individual. We reached out, we kind of left a message for him, and we had said, like, we contacted to see what internet incorporated service. We were using their ISP that was actually using this here. You can see the who is information on whatever internet incorporation, and they have system access on this specific computer. We let them know, hey, your data it's got a post over there on the dark web on this Torum link. You can go take a look. We'll get into that more, right, as to how they kind of target you, but I want to drive home how actionable monitoring the dark web can be, kind of looking for this information. This is the sort of stuff you can find all over the place daily, and it just gets worse, right? This one's good. This one's kind of peculiar. In the last couple slides, I think I hope anyway, that it showed some trajectory of like the kind of information you can find. But now I want to show this even more. This is the Empire Market screenshot. And I think it shows the evolution, right, of how hackers are really turning their exploits and their attacks, these vulnerabilities that they take advantage of, they're transforming that into a business and an enterprise. So this Empire Marketplace isn't the dark background. It's not that black page with the green text on it like the uber elite hackers we were just looking at. But this Empire Market, this kind of looks like eBay or Amazon. It's got a pretty interface. It's fully fledged out. It has a conversion rate for Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrencies you might be using there. This is kind of wild. You can see the seller's reputation. You can know how many products they've sold and in what time period. So this page specifically is selling a rat or a remote access Trojan, but it could be anything, right? This next page showcases another forum post here, and their claim to fame is maybe taking your malware, taking your own, your exploits, your change, say you're another hacker, you're another bad guy adversary, and your own toolkit, well, on its own, maybe it gets caught by antivirus. Maybe EDR products, whatever, some other software for the defenders, for the good guys, it stops your malware. On your own, your tool isn't up to snuff. So Cryptex, as we can see here, hey, we'll go ahead and take your malware and make it better. We'll obfuscate it or mask it so it hides under the radar and doesn't get caught by antivirus. I think that's interesting because it kind of tailors to a different audience, right? They have a different go-to-market strategy where you're benefiting other hackers doing a little business-to-business operations. And I don't mean to be showing you all this stuff or bringing you on this wild dark web safari to spook you or scare you. Like, obviously, this is scary stuff, but I really want to open your eyes to the sheer volume and the scale of this sort of underground industry. So when we think of hacking, we think of the usual scheme, right?
Get back.
A little phishing attempt, a scam email, maybe with some macro-enabled Word document, or a sketchy link for you to go enter your password and your username, just submit your credentials. And you're right. That is absolutely the go-to method. Hackers want to exploit the human element, take advantage of the person, where the vulnerability is people, like you and me. So they'll do their phishing attempts. They'll use their lies and their deceit. We call it, I've kind of gone on the show or saying it's deception, deceit, and decoys, and hackers laying a mousetrap for you. And they might do this at scale. They'll send this out in mass for a phishing mouse spam campaign. But all it takes is one person to click on that link, to run that macro, to enter their credentials. Us defenders, right? Us good guys, us security folks, we have to get 1,000 things right, to get a million things right, to make sure our security is really in place and it's a solid posture. The hackers, they only have to need to get one thing right. Just takes one catch. So with that, let's kind of pivot into malicious marketing here. I want to zoom in a little bit more on those creative marketing tactics, those sales techniques, and that strategy that hackers have been using, and how that dark web industry has really evolved. So let's revisit our good friend here, Empire Market. That's the one where, hey, users can buy and sell attacks and exploits and data in that super commoditized way. You got your listings over here, right? If you don't just want software hacks, you could find some drugs and chemicals, or fraud, or counterfeit items, jewels and gold, etc., etc. One of the interesting products here that I kind of want to showcase in just this listing is a little comparison to Xdetic. Xdetic is a dark web crime forum and a marketplace for selling RDP, for selling that remote desktop protocol access. And we touched on that just a little bit before. If we take a look here, that listing, it's really crazy to see their pitch. Hey, we are just as good as Xdetic and even cheaper. You can get RDP access for as low as 50 cents. No BS. Like, wow. Get them while they're hot, guys, while supplies last. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Take a look at this. The biggest hacked RDP database with the fraud score checker, a proxy score checker, all these things just to build out a product and list it. And it's insane to think that we've come to this point. We've got to this level. It sounds like a pretty good deal though, right? Let me show you Ranyan. This is a really peculiar ransomware as a service, or RAS package. You've heard of SaaS, right? Software as a service, or infrastructure as a service. Well, now apparently we have ransomware as a service. So Ranyan claims, hey, we provide an already configured and compiled, fully undetectable ransomware and decryptor. We're the only ones that provide free anonymous command and control dashboards. And look at this go-to-market strategy. They're showcasing their differentiators, but looking at the sales and marketing tactics down below, this is kind of peculiar. You'll see the evolution and the growth for this product. Take a look. They break down all of their packages and all their contracts. Some options are yearly. You could go in for like a 1-year deal. Or if that's a little too expensive, oh, hey, you could do this for maybe 6 months at a lower price. Maybe you lose some features, but you still have a little bit of flexibility with when you're going to pay and how you're going to work with the deal. But this is just a block of text, right? You're looking at their website and this is just a data dump. If you're a customer, that might kind of make your eyes glaze over, right? If your marketing team, if you're running a business and your marketing team comes to you and says, hey, we're going to draw on the audience, we're going to get customers with this, that probably wouldn't fly, right? Their eyes are just going to glaze over and they're going to fall asleep. They're not even going to bother to read all of this stuff. they kind of want your customers, the audience, right? They want a quick snapshot. They want an easy to understand breakdown and comparison of it, other products, other packages. And that's exactly what Ranyan figured out. Granted, it's still not really the prettiest thing in the world. It's still all grays and pretty mundane. But take a look at how their strategy has changed. They realize, oh, maybe some people like that pay-as-you-go model or the month-to-month subscription. Now they charge a little more for that compared to the time cost of the other packages, and they lose some of the features. But hey, if you want support, a real-time client manager, well, you don't want that 1 month package. You want to go ahead and go for that 6 month package. I think that's kind of neat in a weird way. I think it's really fascinating growth and the evolution to see this hacking and exploit market mature and grow into a real industry and enterprise. It doesn't end at just the sales pitch either. Look at this product. This is Ghostly Shop, which is the next generation of ransomware. So it's one thing to make a promise to sell, right? Get the customer. The next thing is actually deliver a polished product. This business really wants to offer you the best. So they put together this whole dashboard dedicated to control, dedicated to command and control services, to taking advantage of victims, the target, taking the client's actual objective, taking it to the next level. This has all the bells and whistles that you'd expect from any commercialized software suite. It's that single pane of glass, just weaponized for the bad guys, right? It's got the fancy pie charts. It's got the graphs. And this just goes to show, hey, you're working with a really well-structured and organized enterprise, like behind the scenes. These guys really know what they're doing. It's got real-time alerts for recent user activity. Hey, you can see user X has paid the ransom, or user Y has been infected. Maybe there's more messages. I think this goes to show how much that hacker for hire and exploit industry and marketplace has grown and advanced. All right. Now let's pivot a little bit and talk about how they target you, right? We'll take a step back. We'll return to some of those funky forum posts or advertisements for hackers willing to create exploits or perform these attacks like a hacker for hire, and they build out scams to ultimately infect your computers. I've shown you this screenshot already. Like, this might look familiar. This goes to show kind of some more of the complex, intricate, and advanced stuff. How far hackers are going to get their malware on the victim. Here we have someone renting out a phishing environment, or they'll build out a custom domain. That way your phishing email might look legitimate. They'll steal cookies. They'll try and bypass two-factor authentication. They'll kind of give you your own access with a panel that includes the user sessions where you can impersonate them or kind of hijack their browser and do specific things. There's a lot packed in here. So from the user perspective, if we're kind of playing pretend the victim, if I'm going to act as the target right now, on the left-hand side, I have a screenshot of a legitimate website. Here's original OG eBay. On the right-hand side, I have that fake phishing attempt, that trap laid out by the hackers. Can you tell the difference? Can you tell, hey, which is which? Sure, some people might say, oh, this is just eBay. Seriously, who's going to fall for eBay? That's just kind of one example, right? So let's move over to Facebook. How can you tell the difference between this fake credential harvester and the real website? Well, so there are some peculiar telltales, right? We were actually using LastPass, which is a browser extension that kind of works as a password manager. LastPass will smartly detect the domain that you're working on. And if it knows you have a safe password for that domain that's managed by LastPass, it'll suggest and hey, you can click on this to fill in your password and your credentials. It'll offer to just autofill that for you. If you don't have that little icon, if you aren't positive, hey, I'm not getting that notification from LastPass, you might not really be sure you're on the site that you think you're on. You might be being phished. Obviously, we have a lot of conversations about passwords and credentials in the security community, and we encourage everyone to use two-factor and multi-factor authentication, but security is a cat and mouse game, right? The defense kind of ups the ante. Hackers are going to play ball. They're going to catch up. They're going to try new techniques. Hackers are still working against that two-factor authentication. Take a look at this post. This guy says, I need an Office 365 Hotmail clean scan. I need this. Send me the results in a text format over Telegram or Jabber. And this guy's literally going out and asking, hey, I need someone to build this for me. I need someone to put together this toolkit and this exploit for me. I want this credential harvester. And down below, you can see someone else comments on that exact same thread, that exact same post. I need this, but on top of that, I need that two-factor authentication bypass. I need that scam page. Hey, hit me up on Telegram, hit me up on Skype. Reach out. Spooky. This one I think is pretty fascinating. This is, I guess, a case study is kind of the best way to put it. An MSP had offered to us that we could share this and help educate others. But it's a phishing webpage. It's a credential harvester, another online setup, just another trap the hackers have laid out. But it's a fake web page to seemingly log into Office 365. They added the MSP's logo, so it looks pretty legitimate, right? Hey, maybe you'll buy into this. You'll believe that. If you take a look at that URL, it goes to windows.net, and it's HTTPS here. So, okay, but it's got the green lock, so it's obviously secure, right? And that windows.net webpage, windows.net, that's a real Microsoft webpage. If you were to examine the certificate, it's genuinely signed by Microsoft. The thing is, that windows.net page, that's sort of the Azure equivalent of like an Amazon S3 bucket. It looks legitimate in that it's signed by the official trusted source, pulled in with, hey, we've got their maybe email address for that specific MSP, but it's fake. Anyone could go ahead and create a domain like this with a subdomain windows.net because they offer that functionality. This is just a deception technique, just a honeypot, just a trap to grab that password, potentially steal cookies, and then the hackers might kind of level up this attack with that newfound access with those credentials. Okay, we'll hammer the thing against remote desktop protocol. We'll see where else I can log in with this account. They'll weaponize that and do some more damage. So. I also want to show you this one. And I know it's kind of like a fire hose. We're jumping around all these different crazy things. But this one I think we'll harp on for a little bit. This is a Raccoon Stealer. Raccoon Stealer is some malware that will try and keep a pulse on the victim machine, the target, and they'll collect passwords, they'll collect cookies, they'll get all the autocomplete features when you tell Windows or tell your browser, hey, save this password for me for later so I don't have to type it in again. It'll autocomplete and steal all that saved cache data. This is one. The Raccoon Stealer is something that on the dark web, Raccoon Stealer showcasing this with the flashy tagline, hey, we steal and you deal. I like that slogan. This is the kind of thing that people use to build out these humongous databases of PII, personal information and access. So let me show you kind of a real world case of that malware and the attacks like this out in the wild. So last year, the Human Health Services government website, or hhs.gov, had a peculiar vulnerability. There was a little software flaw and a little weakness there. So I'll quickly kind of showcase this. I'll drive by some of the technical stuff because we don't need to get too nerdy. But I still want to get an understanding of what this exploit and this technique was. So this news article from Bleeping Computer explains the attack, and they actually show you the real phishing email. Part of the malspam campaign, here's the email that the victims, the targets actually got. Notice, hey, classic COVID-19 scam, right? The pandemic strikes fear in people, understandably so, right? But it's coming from someone with an email address at letsachievehealth.com. It says it has some information on COVID-19. It wants to talk about the symptoms. Hey, what does this coronavirus actually cause in a person? And how many people have been affected, et cetera. And then it has this little lure here. Like, hey, do you want to know what these symptoms are? Do you want to know who that you might know has been affected by COVID-19? Click here. Click this link to find and research your medical symptoms. Now, of course, right, we're all smart people. We've been trained in this security stuff. We've all taken our security awareness training. So you might hover over the link and get a little preview of the actual destination or where this is actually going to take you in your web browser. So if I hover over that link, this is what I see. I see HTTPS dcis.hhs.gov. Again, HTTPS, hey, that looks secure. That looks good. That's legitimate. hhs.gov. Ooh, it's a real government website. That's got to be legit. Well, it's got a little question mark here, and this URL actually continues. It controls some other variables, some other parameters that go into that request. And it actually, at the very end of the link, takes you to HTTP, couple forward slashes, 195.130.73.229. Weird, sketchy, right? So let me zoom in on that just a little bit. What that's doing, if you were to log in, right, when you enter or you go to that page, that login page that they think that they're going to, that the victim or the target might kind of be tricked by, when you go to that page, it actually takes you to a different website. This is the case of an open redirect vulnerability. I kind of tried to draw this out for us, right? Normal interaction with a web page, say you're logging into Amazon, you're logging into Facebook, or all these other examples we've given. Typically, once the web server has kind of processed your login, they've got a cookie for you, they've got a session set up for your account, they'll redirect you back to your original desired location. Go back to your cart or go see your orders or whatever the case may be. With the open redirect vulnerability that was present on hhs.gov, that destination page could easily be modified or tampered with. Like that was in the control of the end user. So the hackers and the bad guys could take advantage of that and totally send the victim out to a different location. Send you off to a new malicious web page that might grab your IP or grab your cookies or anything like that. That could start a download on the victim computer, do a little drive-by download. The poor, innocent end user, unknowing this, would be totally susceptible. So they'd open up the document, whatever it downloaded, and they'd learn more about their COVID-19 symptoms, supposedly. So this is it. Here's what we got. I went over to https dcis.hhs.gov, followed that login, went to that 195.130 random IP address, and it started with that drive-by download technique, a little zip file, document.zip. I'm over in Firefox right now in this web browser, but it could totally be the same in any web browser. So if I were to take a look at this little document.zip file, maybe the victim clicks on this, they kind of see what they're looking for, right? Here's a coronavirus.doc, little Microsoft Word document they can explore. Now, for some of the sysadmins in the audience or those that are on the more tech side, you might notice some oddballs here. Notice that Windows considers this coronavirus.doc a shortcut file. And maybe that's easily overlooked. Maybe the victim, the target, doesn't realize or recognize it. You'll notice here they actually have the show file names extensions clicked and toggled on over on the top right of Explorer. Interesting trick for shortcut files or .lnk files extensions. Windows actually doesn't show their extension even if you have that setting turned on. Kind of a clever idiosyncrasy there. So I opened up my coronavirus.doc, I extracted it there, and I want to go ahead and take a look as to what this thing might do. So I click on it, but I get an error message from Microsoft Word. The file is broken. Okay. And at this point, the jig is up, right? Because the user has been fooled into downloading this. They've been tricked. They've ran the program. They've let it execute. Here comes trouble, right? So what does this thing actually do? I'll peel back the layers here, but I'll save you from the techno mumbo jumbo and get right to the point. This coronavirus.doc was actually making another call or making another web request, trying to download something else. It actually was going to reach out to 185.62.188.204 and grabs a corona.exe. It downloads this, it stores it in your temporary directory under the obviously innocent and totally not suspicious name HHKFW. And then it will carry on its merry way, doing more command and control, kickstarting ransomware, stealing data to exfiltrate, et cetera, et cetera. From the user's perspective, though, us innocent victim, us target here, we just get a simple pop-up. This file's broken. It says it's from Microsoft Word, so maybe we trust it. And then it deletes itself. Nice. So see that weird IP address, though? See this hunt post corona.exe? You can bet your bottom dollar that that is the raccoon stealer malware. Now that that's been implanted, it'll do more collection. It'll gather all that data that will then be sold or abused or kind of just ponied around on the dark web. So if we take a step back, right? We've got a cleverly timed social engineering attack with the COVID-19 pandemic. We're kind of tugging on the heartstrings of our victim, taking advantage of a trusted official website, hhs.gov, a legitimate government website. And we're using some peculiar Windows techniques to sneak in malware. All this to deliver one payload that we've seen on the dark web that anyone could go buy off the shelf, right? I could do it, you could do it. Obviously, we never would, but the script kiddie, whoever strange fellow in mom's basement with the hacker hoodie on, anyone could do that. They could go buy this. And this will do more damage, wreak havoc, start ransomware, collect credentials, and then sell it more and more and more. So what do we do about all this? Well, we want to be the good guys, right? We want to stop the bad guys and mitigate and protect against this malware and all this ransomware and the hacks and exploits. So us over at Huntress, we try and educate the community, like shine the spotlight on these hackers. And that's why I've taken you on this safari ride. And I've got these other screenshots up here for some tickets or some real incidents that you might end up finding through Huntress. Huntress knows that hackers can slip by under the radar. We know that there has to be defense in depth. We know that there has to be layered security, everything that we've seen with the fishnet example. And we want to operate as a layer of that security, just one piece in the security platform, right? We can't say that there's a silver bullet or some magic wand or one singular tool that will make the bad guys go away and stop all these hacks. So with the mindset of assume compromise, right? Huntress, we want to alert you when those hackers do slip by. And it's super simple. We offer all these instructions, the remediation instructions, all in that dashboard. And we were talking about all these other services now between managed AV, ransomware, Canaries, external reconnaissance. I've actually heard conversations where techs use those as training. Like, hey, I've got this assisted remediation plan in front of me. I need to go delete a couple registry keys. I need to go kind of remove some services or delete some files within the file system. You want to do that? Like, you need to learn how to do that, right? As a hands-on operating tech. Here's what you could do. Actually use that as part of their education. And I think that's kind of neat when we're looking at some of that stuff. On top of that, we hope to do educational events like this. Obviously, I'm putting out this kind of show, the song and dance for all of you. And I don't mean to make it a commercial or a sales pitch, but this sort of stuff we just want to bring to the community. One event that we have coming up in March, we have the 23rd and 24th of March, we have Hack It, which should be a stellar, awesome, hopefully, fingers crossed, a little event that's going over 2 days, but we're bringing in MSP community speakers, and we got a little bit of the Huntress strong armor there. We're going to be talking about making malware, like letting you be in the driver's seat to decide some of the cool stuff that, what would you, if you were acting as the adversary, if you were putting this up on the dark web, what features and functionality would you include in that? We also have some hacker horror stories and sea stories, tales from the trenches, real shop talk to talk about, hey, daily in and out operations. And then we're going to get super duper technical, where I'm going to nerd out and talk about some of those bypassing antivirus techniques and slipping past prevention, antivirus evasion. Cool stuff. So I hope you tune in for that. But that is enough, I think, from me. How do we do on time? Was I talking for too long?
No, you did better than you sold yourself on. I mean, I thought you were going to go for like 3 hours and we are going to have to wrangle you in. And besides, you say all the scary stuff, like everyone else does all the good stuff. So folks, any questions out there for John, Jeremy, or Ryan, or myself, I guess, not on Huntress, of course. Great company to work with. We've worked with you guys now for 2+ years. It's been a phenomenal relationship and we plan on it continuing. Any questions, feel free to post in the chat, raise your virtual hand, come on camera and just wave at us. And if not, we'll stop the recording and we'll share it all with you. Well, I don't see anything out there, folks. So couple things. First off, fantastic job, Jeremy, Ryan, and John. I especially like that it was really educational. You guys posted, you shared it. I think Jeremy or Ryan, at the end of your slides, you had certainly the offering. Come give Huntress a try if you haven't. So we do recommend you guys all go check out huntress.com and take a look and sign up for the trial if you haven't already and whatnot. They are a wealth of information on cybersecurity. So there are always educational content coming from Huntress Labs, and we appreciate that. We love having you as a partner.